In this video, you're going to see how we build a custom interface for a Voiceflow chatbot. The biggest benefit of doing this is having a simple app that uses AI to connect the user's wants to your app's functionalities. With a custom Voiceflow interface, like the one we're going to show, instead of having a dashboard with all these different buttons and data points, you're connecting the user to the data with AI in the middle to translate between them. I believe this is how the future apps are going to look like.
When the web chat widget first launched as sort of like a paradigm, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, the bots were not very powerful. And so you would, use the website, then you use the widget for a little bit, then you go back to the website. The bots are now getting so good that we've seen where like you click on the, you click on the widget and it just goes full screen because there's no point in even using the website anymore. Yeah. And it starts to get you thinking like, what's the interface even going to look like? Like, are websites obsolete now? Like, I'm not even using the website. I'm just using the chatbot.
Of course, we can all speculate, but this is a useful skill regardless. Let's get into it. This is a quick demo of an app deployed with the Voiceflow API and using React. I've deployed it via Versal, which was completely free to set up. And all this app is we launch our Quran chat. And if you don't know what the Quran chat is, it's an AI that I made. It's in my previous video, but you just type in your query, like give me the first Quran ayat of Quran. If you just type in a simple query to our Voiceflow agent, it's going to fetch the service that you want. So this is actually the first verse of the Quran. You get a recitation output and you get an English translation. Basically, it's that custom interface for an app. This doesn't have to be a Quran chat. This can be any type of chatbot, an internal tool, or a lead generation magnet. It's crazy what you can do. So all I did was create a simple React app and I connected it to the Voiceflow API. Now let's go through a step-by-step process in building this out ourselves. You're going to see me create a fresh Voiceflow project and a fresh React app, and you're going to see how we connect the two. All right, this is going to be the step-by-step from ground zero. Head over to voiceflow.com, and this is going to be that AI that controls your back end. Over here, this new agent. We're going to call this Voiceflow API React and English. We're going to be greeted with the basic setup. Let's delete everything. And to start with, we are just going to connect this to a simple talk. I am your friend. For the culture, we can write hello world. So we're just going to start off with that to start our agent off, and we'll build on top of it as we go along. Now the goal is going to be connecting this to our React app. To do that, you're going to need your API key, which you can find if you click on this back button. Go into the integrations tab, copy your API key. This is going to be that authentication to connect to your agent. Make sure you don't share it with anyone. We're going to create our React app. Go into any directory of your choosing and click on new folder. This is going to be where we store our React app. Next, you want to go onto a code editor. I'm going to be using VS Code, Visual Studio Code. Go into the folder that you just created. So that's going to be over here. And that is our folder. Now you have your directory open in Visual Studio Code. And you want to go into the terminal here. You want to create a Vite React app. It's npm create Vite at latest. This is just a copy and paste from their website. You can just find this online, and I'll put this down in the description as well. Just copy and paste this command into the terminal and just follow the setup instructions. We're going to be going with React. Choose whatever you want. I just like React. And it's a JavaScript app. Telling us to run these two commands, which we will do, npm install. This is going to run your development environment, and Vite starts you out with this nice page. We're going to delete all of this because we don't need it. So you're going to notice that in the directory that you created, Voiceflow React, there's going to be a bunch of files here that manage the React app that you created. So there's already some CSS loaded in, and this is the main app right here. This is the code that controls the app.jsx. So it's very safe to just go ahead and delete all this HTML over here. And we do not need the set count either. So this is a fresh Vite React app right now. Next thing we want to do is connect the API key that we got into our code. And the safest way to do this is with a .env file. To do that, go into the main directory of your project. For me, it's Voiceflow React. And I'm going to create new file and .env. Call this Vite Voiceflow API. Copy your API key, paste in the API key. Now, in your app.jsx file, you're going to want to import that key into here. Paste that name right here. So now our API key is accessible through this variable that we're importing from our .env file. Next, you want to set up two variables that will help with interacting with your Voiceflow API. The first one is a launch variable that keeps track of the launch state of your Voiceflow agent. So the way the Voiceflow API works is there is two types of requests you can make to your agent. The first one is a launch request, which is what happens when you start a chat with the agent, which is actually starting that conversation. You need to keep track of whether your agent has launched a chat or not. And we're going to use that with launch and set launch. And we're going to set it to false to start out. So when someone first opens our app, the agent has not been launched yet. The second variable is an arbitrary user ID. So the Voiceflow API requires a user ID for each and every unique conversation. So if you're running an app with multiple users and you have accounts set up, you're going to want the user ID to probably be the way you assign user IDs to your users. We're just going to have it as an arbitrary user ID. It could be anything random. I'm just putting Hassan over here, which is my middle name. And next, let's start out by creating a button that once clicked, we launch the chat with our agent. We're just having a simple div in here, and we are conditionally rendering a launch button. If we're in a state of not launch, which basically means that the chat hasn't launched yet, we're going to be showing the launch button. And on click, we're sending this to a launch chat function. So when someone clicks our launch button, we're going to trigger the launch chat function, and we have to write that function. Let's create a function called launch chat. And this is where we're going to connect to the API. So go to the how to start a conversation tab, have your API key here. And we want to import Axios into our project because Axios is how we send HTTP requests. Head over to your app and simply import Axios. Also, one more thing, also import useState from React because we're using that. You can see that they have a function here, which is sending an Axios post request to the interact endpoint. We're sending our API key as an authorization header, and the request data is what they put over here, request : request, and this request variable is found over here. This is the request, and you can see that they have a type of launch here for that HTTP request. So there's two types of requests you can send to the interact endpoint, which you can read as well in the docs. The first one is a launch request, which is how you start the conversation with the bot, with your AI agent. Once the chat is launched, you can start sending it, I think dialogue requests or whatever the name is. Then you can start actually sending queries from the user to interact with the agent. So this is the finished launch chat functionality. We're sending it our API key. We are putting in all these other headers that was included in the docs. And in our request, we are putting in the type launch, which is simply telling our agent that we want to start a new chat. One more important detail, you have to include a user ID in the URL here. Like I said, this can be anything arbitrary for a simple app. And this basically keeps track of unique conversations with your agent. And once we send this response, so all this code is doing is incrementally adding the agent's text responses into a variable. And now we have the agent's response available in this variable that we can render to the user in our app now. So now we are setting launch to true. So now our app knows that the user has started a chat. And once set launch has been set to true, this conditional render of the launch button will no longer render. If the agent response array has data in it, which means that we interacted with the Voiceflow API, our Voiceflow agent, then we're going to just render to the user the response that he's getting. And let's try running our app, launch chat. There you go. So, greetings, I am your friend, hello world. Now you can go back to your agent now that the connection is established. You can make this more complicated, like where you just listen to a text and then you have like a response AI, and we can just make this GPT-4o mini, and we can just give it the last utterance. So this is just a basic conversation between GPT and the user. Now to implement this into the React app, you need to add an input form, which allows the user to type in messages to your app and then send that text to the Voiceflow agent. You need to make a new function called send query. Since I already have it built out from the Quran chat app, we can just copy this and modify it for our usage. So let's just modify it for our usage. Same thing as before, we have an interact call. And now instead of having the launch type, now we're actually sending it a text type of a request. Keep in mind, if you don't launch the chat, if you don't send a launch request, you can't send any other type of request. The chat must start with a launch, and then you can start that conversation. So we're sending it a text type of request, and the payload is this text variable that we're sending to the function, and the authorization is going to be our API key, and we're going to be putting the response into a set agent response. We have a handle submit event, which is going to happen, which I'll show you how we use. And you can see we're calling the send query function, this function, through the handle submit. Conditional render, if the chat has been launched, now we want to have a form which we're going to submit with an input text that's going to be sending the query to the user, and there's going to be a button to submit the chat. So as you can see, there's a variable we don't have yet, so we have to set a query variable. So head over to the top and let's add a const query and set query. And this is going to be what the user wants to type to our agent. That's mapped out, and we're sending, once the form is submitted, if the user types an enter or hits submit, then we're calling the handle submit function, which is going to be sending the query, and then that API connection will be made. And we are updating the agent response with the new data, and it's automatically going to be rendered to the user over here. So let's see if this works. First try, let's see what happens. Let's refresh this. Did I save this? Save. All right. Let's hit launch chat, and there you go. So we have the response from our agent, the greeting message, and we can send, hey there, I like ice cream. And remember, this is just a simple conversation with GPT-4. So GPT said, yeah, you're right, bro, that's awesome. And as you can see, we just made a custom interface for our Voiceflow agent with React. And yeah, that's quite awesome. Of course, you can modify the agent as you like, different use cases, and you can customize the interface with CSS styling. You can use Tailwind CSS and, you know, become very fancy with it. You know, sky's the limit. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you got some value, if you learned something new, leave a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I will be putting in some of the code that I use in the description, so check that out.